we have the pleasure to host the most famous search engine on Earth. I asked him if I could do the joke before. Bing. It's his name, okay? Yeah. Awesome dev from the Halo team. We have the Halo team on the left here. Halo, you know the game with Master Chief and everything. He's a dev in the Halo team. They built a website with Orchard, and we are very proud of that. I think they are the first Microsoft customers. I didn't tell them when they asked me, but I think you're the first to go live. Thank you. No, I can say I'm a Microsoft customer, so no, thank you. So thank you for being here, and have a great talk. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks for the introduction, Sebastian. I'm very happy to be here to talk to you guys about Halo, Waypoint, and Orchard and how we use it, because it's slightly different. So a quick overview. The first few slides, I'll be talking about some history of Halo, Waypoint, and a bit of history of myself. We'll talk about some of the customization that we did in Orchard. I think the interesting part will be the end-to-end demos that I'll be showing you guys. Finally, we'll round it out with some of the challenges that we faced when we first moved to Orchard, as well as some of the stuff that we are thinking of doing in Orchard. Finally, I think we have 15 minutes for Q&A. I think we are flexible with that. So if you guys can hold on to the questions to the end, I'll be happy to answer them. So just a quick overview. I'm going to leave this slide here while I talk about myself, actually. So before I joined 343 Industries, I actually worked in WindowsPhone.com. So at that point, I was fortunate enough to actually have worked with 2 different CMS systems. WindowsPhone.com at that point when I joined was actually hosted by Microsoft.com, which is a CMS, which is a SharePoint-based CMS. So you have InfoPath, XML, XSLT, and it hosts almost all of Microsoft.com sites that you see today. I was part of the team that moved the WindowsPhone.com site off of Microsoft.com to another CMS, which is also internal, is the Xbox.com CMS. So if you go to Xbox.com today, they have their own CMS system, and it's the same one that WindowsPhone.com is currently using. So that is a bit of background. So roughly a year ago, I joined 343 Industries to work in Halo. Interesting enough, they were also at crossroads. They were investigating at different CMS systems. So when I first worked in Windows Phone, I actually already know about Orchard. I tried to push for Orchard at that point, but certain things didn't come true. We didn't choose Orchard for Windows Phone. But this time around for Halo, we managed to convince the upper management. Obviously, we did the requirements, and we decided if Orchard was the right choice for us, and indeed it was. So we decided, you know what, we're going to move to Orchard. So why am I showing you this slide? So within the Halo ecosystem, we have a lot of content that is currently stored in our legacy CMS system. For us to move the entire Halo to Orchard is going to take us a long time. Just because we have to migrate content, we have to create new content for our new scenarios. What we decided then is to break it up into phases. So what you're seeing here is the official Halo Waypoint blog. At that point, our blog system is actually a third-party software. It's blogengine.net. So we decided, you know what, Orchard already has blog, so let's just migrate our blog to use Orchard. So that would be our phase 1 release. We wanted to push it out to public to see how Orchard will work in a real production scenario. We want to make sure that the performance and the reliability is there. So if you go to blogs.halowaypoint.com today, it's actually fully powered by Orchard. So as I was saying, we did a bunch of research on different CMS systems. So why did we land on Orchard? This is not the full list. Our Excel sheet actually has a lot more requirements, but these were the main reasons. Us being a Microsoft game studio, we are like .NET developers, so we naturally want to choose a framework, a language that we are all familiar with. So it's great that Orchard is .NET based, it's ASP.NET MVC basically. So we were very happy with that. We didn't really just discard any CMS system out there that wasn't .NET, but obviously they will have a lower score, which they have to make up with a much richer feature set. We really like that Orchard has a web-based admin portal. There were certain CMS that we know, like the Xbox.com CMS is actually a software, it's a web application. What that limits is we need to make sure that all our end users can access the admin portal. So since it's web-based, we don't have to care about what machine they're using, whether it's a Mac, whether it's a Windows Phone, whether they're using a device. As long as they have a browser, they can access the admin portal, so that's really nice. All of our site and services today are actually already deployed into the cloud. So we needed a CMS that we can do the same, mainly because we want to be able to deploy, monitor, and maintain just like how we do for the rest of our site and services. So it's really nice that Orchard already has the deployment scripts ready, so we can actually do the deployment as well. Besides just looking at feature set, we also actually look at the code base, right? Since it's open source, we can look at the code. We make sure that it has the correct unit tests. I think it should have most unit tests and code coverage numbers. So it was good. And for open source project, I thought the community was well supported. You guys have weekly meetings and stuff. I even attended a few where I didn't talk, I was just listening to what you guys are talking about. So that's really nice. I think this is the most important point for Orchard, the extensibility part. So since I already work in 2 CMS systems, I should talk about them a bit. So for the Microsoft.com CMS, it's actually owned by another team. So if we wanted to make changes to the CMS, we actually had to file like a feature request to them. Then it gets stack ranked in their stack. Essentially, we didn't get anything that we wanted done, which is why we had to move out of Microsoft.com to another CMS system. For the Xbox.com CMS, it was kind of interesting. What we did at that point was we took their source code and we decided to deploy our own CMS. But then we made a bunch of changes, which we then have to do integration. And it was a mess at that point because there were so much changes on their end, there were so much changes on our end. Integration was a mess. So what do we like about Orchard in terms of extensibility? We like that it only has a smaller set of core libraries and modules, which we don't really have to touch unless there's bugs. And then you can do these modules, which is like a plug and play to us. So you can plug in your modules, which then can change Orchard's behavior and extend its feature set to fit our scenarios. And obviously, it's free. It's open source. Obviously, when I say free, like nothing in the world is free. You have integration costs, you have developer costs to it. So the license is free, which is nice. And since it's well supported, support is free. If you have issues, you can ask in the forum, you can ask in Stack Overflow, someone will try to answer you. And the best part is Sebastian is cheap. So we can just send him a message and he'll help us. So that was some of the main reason why we chose Orchard. Right after we decided we need to do the phase 1 release, we only had a few months to do what we wanted to do. We kind of scope it down to just what we need to ship the blocks being powered by Orchard. So the V1 release was back in March this year, so just a few months back. So like I said, it's a smaller set of stuff that we did. We added ADFS integration for security for admin portal. All of our end users are Microsoft employees, so they have Microsoft credentials. So it only makes sense that we make use of ADFS for security. We made some small updates to the TinyMCE editor. The first update that we did was we upgraded to version 4, the latest TinyMCE. We also extended it by putting in 2 different settings. So I don't know if you can see, in the image on the right, you have the ability to put a CSS file, which would then allow our blog authors, when they're creating the blog post, to be able to see the actual blog post in the same font size, font color, background color, and styling as the site. So they don't even have to preview the content. They can see it right there while they're authoring it. We also extended, so in TinyMCE, there's an ability called Insert Template. It's a drop-down. So what you can do is you can define certain markups, certain HTML markups, or some BB code markup. So for us, over here in my example, I have 2, which is kind of like BB code markup. One is the external video, the other one is a more tag. The external video basically says if the author wants to put an external video in an iframe format, they can put that markup. What the site will do is take that markup and translate it into HTML code. The idea was we didn't really want our authors to really know how to do certain stuff, because certain stuff might change along the way. So if our site decides to change how we want to do the iframe markup, we can choose to do it on our end. And the most important part, which I think Sebastian touched about, is we created a REST API for this V1 release. So why did we need a REST API, since it's a website? So the thing is, Halo Waypoint is not just a website. We actually have 3 mobile apps in all the 3 major OS. We actually have an Xbox 360 client app. We also have the game, obviously, a game client. So we have several different clients needing to get certain content out of Orchard. So for us, when we see Orchard, we are seeing it as a content storage, and we need to get content out via the API, which is why we created the REST API. And for the rest of the talk, I'll be focusing on the REST API, essentially. So I should mention, since we want to be good citizens of the open source community, the REST API module is currently going through legal review, which we will want to put out in the public, so you guys can download and try it out as well. If you guys can find bugs, just let me know as well. That would be great. For the TinyMCE editor, I'll touch about it later on in the future slide because we have even more powerful stuff that we want to do. The ADFS, there's already a module out there. I don't think it's worth putting it out again. So before I actually go to show you guys the REST API, let me just show you the end-to-end scenario of what we're doing for the Halo Waypoint blog. Jump to the browser here. Cool. So basically, this is our current Halo Waypoint blog. This is the production site. So like I said, since we use the REST API, we sort of created a gap between Orchard and our site. Because in theory, when you create a content in Orchard, the author can preview stuff before they publish it. So this is our public site, so it's only getting stuff that is already published, right? So how do we solve that? What we decided to do is we decided to create two sites. One is a preview site and one is a publish site. Our API supports this dual mode type of retrieval of content. The preview site has a different lockdown because we didn't want our content to leak, so that when the author is creating stuff, they can preview it before they publish it. So this is our current public site. So I already deployed a preview site on my box. So it is not the full set of our site. So I only strip out all the other features, and it only has what it needs to connect to Orchard. So over here, this is my preview site. So it's very bare. So right now there's only, I think, 5 blog posts, 3 blogs altogether. And then it's connecting to my local Orchard, which is this guy. I just deployed on my box, which is the 1.8 version. And basically, it only has our REST API module enabled. And I can go here and the Halo Waypoint blog. So you can see there's 5 blog posts in my Orchard CMS today, which represents this. So because it's a preview site, what we do on the site is we render this is what we call the admin header. Since we sort of created this gap between Orchard and our site, we needed a way to allow our authors, when they're previewing stuff, to quickly jump to Orchard as well. So what we added here is this edit page. Basically, since this page is the blog row page because it's listing a whole list of blog posts, if I click on edit page, what it does is it jumps straight to Orchard, to the blog itself, which is a Halo Waypoint blog, so the authors can change stuff. So since all our blog posts is also coming from Orchard, what we did is we added this view content. So right now you can see every single blog post has this yellow link here, which is edit link. So the user can actually click on this and jump straight to the blog post as well. This obviously didn't have the TinyMCE editor stuff that I was talking about. So yeah, so this is to simplify our author's job of authoring stuff on the preview side. And moving forward, for the rest of our site, for anything that is going to be powered by Orchard, coming from Orchard, it will have the same type of behavior, so you can edit stuff easily. So the earlier page was the blog row page, and this is the blog detail page. Basically, it has the entire blog post. On the top right here, you can see the listing of the blogs, and then you have the tag cloud feature. And right below here, you have the related posts. And also, you are also able to like browse the blog like you're reading a book. So you can go by chronological order. So basically, that's our site. So this whole thing is powered by the Orchard REST API. So how do we actually do this? I'm going to jump back to the site now. So the REST API. Before I show you guys the REST API in action, I'm going to just give you a brief overview of the signature that we have. So for our API, the first one is getting a specific content via the ID. So the same ID that we saw in the link, that's the ID that we use to get a content. But in Orchard, there's also the auto route path, which is kind of nice because they ensure that every content in Orchard has a unique path. We also make use of that. So for that, we do content/type, and we pass the vanity path, which is essentially going to match the auto-route path, and it's able to get the content. In Orchard, there's also the concept of container and containables, which is what a blog and a blog post is, which is like a parent-child relationship. So we have this particular API, which is saying, given a content of ID, give me all the children. But then in Orchard, you might also have a scenario whereby you don't have this parent-child relationship. Like for example, if you decide to store all the configuration in Orchard, and you want to get all of the configuration at one go. We have the contents/type, which then you can get all the type of content that you want. The last two is the complex one, which was created to sort of enable the block scenarios that we have. The first one is related. So what we like about Orchard was it has this taxonomy feature, which is like a control tagging in our world. What we did was we created a global taxonomy tree, and we expect all the content in our ecosystem to be tagged the same way. Then what happens now is if given a content item which has tag A, B, C, we're going to go back and find other content that has the best matches in terms of the terms. And it's also ordered by publish date, which is how we ensure that the latest content is always going to show up in the related post. And lastly, the last one is the taxonomy API, is to enable the cloud, the tag cloud feature. So given a content of type, give me all the taxonomy. Later on, you'll see in the response, what we do is we return you essentially a taxonomy tree with the number of content that has the tag as well as the tag weight. So it's up to the clients to decide how they want to render the tag cloud. So just to go back to the block details page, basically we have 4 major sections on this page, each of them using a different API. For the block details itself, we are actually using the auto-route path. The reasoning is given the URL, we don't actually have an identifier to get the content. We are actually using the path to match, to go to Orchard and say, hey, given this path, is there a content there? The related post below is basically using the related API that I was talking about. On the top right, you have the block listing, which is basically 3 blocks. We created a content, which is a block list, essentially a content picker, so that you can order them, you can add more blocks, you can remove them. And the tag cloud is essentially using the taxonomy API. So now, I'll try to show you guys the REST API in action by itself. It's going to be tough. Where's my mouse? Okay. I'm going to use the app actually on Chrome, so that it's easier for you guys to see the request and the response. So like I said, this is my one box. So I'm going to do content/ID. Hide the request and response because they're not useful. Can you guys see? Cool. So this is our response. This is for a single content item. We give you back the ID, the type. Since this is a blog post, there's no children. And then we have 2 sections here. One is the view. The view is what we call all the fields, or all the parts and the fields in this content item. So you have the title part with the text, the auto-route part with the path. You have the body, which is all the HTML stuff, as well as some other fields. Like I said, we have a global taxonomy. So this particular blog post is tagged with Halo 5. And we have some other stuff that we needed for our site. Over here, we have what we call a links section. Basically, we wanted our API in such a way that you can navigate from a single content to other related content. So actually, I'm going to make one more request, which is the blog itself. It's the blog. The blog is 36. So that's clearer. So for the blog, you have the similar structure for a response. For the links, we have the self, which is 36, and you have the children, and your children count. Because we know this is a parent, we get the count. So if I make this request now, over here you get a slightly different response because you're getting back a list of items. What we do is we provided the paging information. It's up to our clients to decide how they want to do paging. So over here you have the start at, which is the index, the start at index. You have an inline count to tell you how many results is in my array, and as well as the total count. So what we could do is, there's a few query string parameters you could do. You could do start at equal 1 and count equal 3. Which basically changes your paging information. It's going to tell you your inline counting has 3, but in theory there's altogether 5. Our clients can then decide how they want to do their pagination. And the content item is basically an array of stuff. Like here you see you have an array of 3 blog posts. And again, the blog posts have the similar response as you saw earlier for a single content item. You have the view and you have the links. So I touched on getting a content by ID and children. So let's do the path actually. So that's too long. I can try. Copy this. So since this is a single content, we'll do blog posts. Oh, I have one here. So you can see I'm doing give me a content which is of type blog post given a vanity path, which is this path. So you get the same response. It gets back this guy. And you can see in the links, you have the self, which is 51. And over here, you can see I have a preview equal true. If you look at the view, you'll say it's updated. If I do, this is our switch between the published content and the latest version of the content. So if I remove this guy, you'll see it has the published content, which is still the great journey. So that's the difference for the preview and the publish. So I'll also just show you guys the last two that I covered in the earlier slide. You have the taxonomy. Let me show the related first. So 51. Yep. So this is content/51 related, which is saying, given a content with ID 51, give me all the related stuff. Since it's also a list of stuff, in theory you could have many content items which are all related. You have the same response, which is you have paging, and you have an array of content items. Over here, they're saying, hey, for the content item 51, this other item 49 is actually related. Why is it related? Because over here, if you scroll down, in the global taxonomy, it's also tagged with Halo 5, so they're all related. And lastly, you have the taxonomy API. So far you have seen two types of response. One is for a single item, one is for a list of items. The taxonomy is slightly different. Essentially, it's going to mimic the taxonomy tree in Orchard. So like I said, we have a global taxonomy. In our global taxonomy, essentially there's two terms. One is the game. Within game, there's two terms. One is Halo 4 and one is Halo 5. And you can see we gave you the reference count, which is the number of items that is tagged with that term, as well as the weight. And likewise for community, there's another term which is tag 2, and we only have one item that is tagged with that. So basically that's the REST API. Jump back to the slide. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the REST API. This is going to be a bit dry. Because I'm going to show you guys some code snippets, and if they are wrong, I have to blame Sebastian because he helped us with it. So high level is basically a web API module in Orchard. I don't think it's any different from any web API that is out there. So first you have you register the route for the request to go to your module. You add the authorization filter check. Because it's an API, we wanted to lock it down. We don't want everybody to be able to access our API. And the action and in the controller, the action will just retrieve the content from the DB. And then you have formatters which output response. I'm calling this Orchard's web API routing. Essentially, it's Orchard's routing. It's not the same as a web API routing. Basically, you have to create a class which is going to implement the IHP route provider or iRoute provider. And Orchard knows to go and get all the routes that was declared and register within the system. So over here, you have an example of me registering for the taxonomy API. For API authorization, in web API, I think there's two filters. One is the authorized attribute, which is going to be based off your current user and role. we are just doing certificate check. So we are using the authorization filter attribute. What you could do is, for any incoming request, you make sure they attach a client certificate. You make sure the thumbprint is the valid one before you authorize it. If not, you just return a not authorized response code. I'm not going to go into detail of the controller. Basically, it's the same API controller. We have a CMS content API controller, which is abstract. And then each of the different type of controller just implements it slightly different in terms of how it retrieves the content. Some of it is using Content Manager. Some of it is using actual SQL queries. For formatters, basically it's the same for Web API. You implement the media type formatter. For us, if you download the code, you'll see we have two types. We have a JSON and XML. And you register the type of accept headers for the request. For our JSON, we accept those, application JSON and text JSON. And basically you override this function, which is write to stream async. I'm just gonna say there's two very custom stuff. One is the materialize. Sebastian already talked about it. So we are also using, under his guidance, we also call it materialize. And there's a JSON back serializer, which is the output of the back. So if you remember, I said for our API, there's three types of result set. You have a single content item, which is the API content item. You have a list of content items, and you have the taxonomy API result. All of our result implements the iAPI result interface. Over here, it's just doing a check to see what type of result it is before you can materialize the result. When I actually go into the materialize function here, what it does, well, actually I skipped one level. In the first level, what it does is it loops through all the content part and all the fields. And it calls this particular function, which basically knows of all the different type of fields in Orchard, and it knows how to output the response. So for example, if it's a text field, basically we are saying for this bag, which is a dynamic object, we are gonna assign it a name using the field name, and then we'll assign the value. So you can do what you want. So like what Sebastian was talking about when you say the media picker, in theory here, what you could do is then change the value to have the full URL. If not, it's going to output all the attributes, which you don't really need. JSON back serializer is, I believe it's an Orchard interface, the iBack serializer. Basically, it just outputs the dynamic back in a JSON format. It checks that if it's an array, it knows how to write the array. So some of the challenges that we hit when we implemented this API in particular. Ramping up into customizing Orchard just took longer than expected. We only had a few months at that point. We need to learn how to work in Orchard. We need to learn, like, if you try to find certain stuff online, you might not know if it's the right one because along the way, stuff might change. And certain stuff that we are doing is so customized, it was like there was nothing out there for us to refer to. Understanding how to optimize the queries. When we first started the API, the REST API module, we actually made use of Content Manager for everything. So it was fine if you only have 10 blog posts in your system. Once you migrated all 3,000 blog posts in, we started to see our API taking a much longer time to process everything. Sebastian actually just wrote a blog just a few months ago, I think a few weeks ago, which talks about the Orchard database. It's highly recommended that you guys read it. I only wish he wrote that earlier so that we can understand Orchard's database much earlier, so we didn't have to hit with what we hit when we try to ship. So what are we going to do with Orchard now that we have done our phase 1 release, right? This is not the full list of stuff. We still have a whole lot of stuff. These are some of the stuff that we already either started working on, already implemented, or is we already investigated and we know what we want to do. Our phase 1 release for the blog was entirely English only, so we didn't really have to tackle localization at all. If we want to move our site and all our clients to use Orchard, we need to solve this bulk localization issue. One of the issues that we see is for us to do bulk localization, you have to first go create every single localized content. Then you can do the export, then you can import. What we are thinking is we'll just create a simple button which can do the creation for all the localized type, for all the localized content, and do the export. So it should be pretty simple. In our world, although we say it's localized, we still have the concept of region. So what do I mean? So we might localize a video content in French, but it might not be available in France. It might be available in French Canada, for example. So what we're thinking is we'll add a region content part, which will then be able to specify which region this particular content is available in. And then we'll modify the API to be able to support this as well. So we can make a request for a particular content given a region, and the REST API will know whether this content is available in that region. If it's not available, you just return a 404. There's a whole bunch of REST API improvements that we are thinking of doing. So we definitely want to expand our REST API for the GET. So right now, today, we cannot do very explicit filtering. So if I have a text field in my content, which is the display author, I wasn't able to filter for that. We want to be able to expand that. So right now, we're thinking either maybe using the search index or looking at SQL queries, investigating on both. We have two scenarios where we want to make use of the REST API for putting back stuff. So one of the scenarios was end-to-end automated testing. So our test case could be, we want to make an update to a content item in Orchard, run my test case to make sure our site gets the correct item with the updated content. So that will be one test case. So right now we can't do that. So we want to make sure we can do that. The other scenario that we have is if we decide to put configuration into Orchard, during deployment, what we want is we want to be able to push the updated config into Orchard as well, and then deploy our site. So those were the two scenarios that I want to do. So if you notice, for our REST API, we are actually using ID. But what we didn't realize is, at that point when we first started, was if you move a content item between environments, because for us, we have different Orchard environments. When we move an item over, the ID might not be the same. So because it's just incremental index. So we're going to move to use the identity part and change our API to actually take in the identity itself, which is a GUID, and that is going to be sticky across environments. Content picker. So we use the content picker field quite a bit in all our content types. I didn't showcase it in the API, but what happens is the API, when it sees the content picker field, is actually going to recursively go through each reference and also materialize that particular guy. So this causes an issue. For example, if your parent has a content picker field which references a child, and the child has a content picker field which references the parent, you get into this circular reference. So our API would not be able to handle that. So we're going to make some changes to the content picker itself, whereby we might have a flag which says, hey, instead of materializing it, just give me the ID. And it's up to the client to decide what they want to do. There's a whole bunch of admin UI updates that we are thinking of doing. So besides what I said for the content picker, we also want to customize the experience of using the content picker field itself. One issue that we face currently is if you use a content picker, in order for you to add a content, you have to actually first create a content. So we're thinking, why not just do it there and then? So we're going to expose the add new content type, and then you'll be able to actually fill up the form, create the content, and you'll just add it into the content picker itself. So it'll save you some steps when you're using the content picker field. I touched on the TinyMCE earlier. So remember I said our phase 1 was just all about blocks. So the way we did the changes for the TinyMCE was really just purely just for blocks. As we start looking forward and start defining all the different content types, what we realize is we need to make use of the HTML editor even more. But then they have different configuration options actually. So for example, if I have a video content in Orchard and I have a description, in theory the description, I don't want any image. But I do want some ability to be able to bold a certain text or put italics in certain text. TinyMCE actually has a pretty diverse configuration option. So what we want to do is we want to push TinyMCE editor into a first-class citizen field, and then you'll be able to specify all the different types of configuration options in a settings page. Then when you're defining your content type at that point, you can actually choose what type of configuration you want for the TinyMCE. So for the name value pair field is something else that we're thinking of doing. I think we've already done it actually. So what happens is if I create a page in Orchard, for a page in our world, we also have meta tags, which essentially is just name value pair, which is description, something, title, something. But we didn't really have a good way of doing it in Orchard. At least I don't think there is, unless you use the content picker, which then you have to create another object, which is the meta tag object. Or if you use JSON, then you have a string, and the site has to pass it. So this is something simple, and I think we already implemented it today. So over here, some of the stuff, we already have it sort of working, and we are going to push to production soon, like the TinyMCE editor itself. I think we have it working as well. So some of the stuff, I think we would actually push it back to the community once we verify it's working fine. So actually, before I jump to the Q&A, let me show you guys something else. All right. So I don't know if you guys know. I have time, right? I don't know if you guys know. I had to push my session from Monday to Wednesday, basically because Monday was when E3 was announced. I don't know if you guys play Halo. There's a few announcements about Halo. We have to update our site for the E3 announcement on Monday. So this page you see here is actually powered by Orchard as well. So it's using the same API to create this page. What we did is we created a dynamic page content type, which is basically panels. As you can see, all of these are panels. We created various types of panels which you can swap in and out. You can reorder them. You can fill out the content itself. So besides the home page, this page is also powered by Orchard. As you can see, it's kind of similar. But over here, you have like a carousel, which is a type of panel we created. You have a gallery media type here. So you can view the image itself. So all these are powered using the same API that I talked about for the blogs, powering some of our pages on the site. We're doing this bit by bit because just doing the whole site is going to take a long time. So that was it. Let me go back to my slide. So one more thing I should say. We're also looking for talented developers to join our team. We are looking for developers with experience in Orchard, customizing Orchard. If what you've seen so far interests you, send me your resume. I'll forward it to our recruiting manager. Also, if you've seen some of the stuff that I talked about, and you already know of a module out there which does something like that, let us know so we don't have to duplicate the efforts in doing it. And if you see some bugs, send me an email as well. And that's it. Any questions?
I have the microphone.
Oh.
A question. So the website is nice. When do you move xbox.com to Orchard?
Sorry?
When do you move xbox.com? Yeah.
We're 343, not Xbox. Okay. I want to be clear.
It's not something that we can do, but yeah.
You said you ran into some issues with the API and the content manager query function. What did you do to overcome those issues? Because I ran into some scenarios too where like I noticed that the more content items I've had and I start using the content manager to query things, it's slow. So what did you?
So I don't know if they solved it in 1.8 whereby they changed to the document base.
Oh, okay.
But the thing that we did was we actually put an Hibernate profiler. I don't know if you use it. You can actually profile your queries to see where is the slowdown. But essentially we did that, then we realized, hey, it's just too slow. We decided to just run with our own SQL queries for certain scenarios.
Okay, that's what I wanted to ask. If you ended up just doing your own.
Yeah.
SQL. Okay.
Some of them are just SQL.
Is it possible to give us, a 50,000 view of the overall, architecture?
What do you mean?
Yeah, how the whole site is layout.
Oh,
You
mean for the site?
Yeah, great.
So our site is basically ASP.NET MVC 4.5. It's a complex beast by itself. So I don't know what you're really asking for. So for our site, why we decided to go with a REST API actually is we couldn't make use of Orchard's rendering engine because our site is so complex. There's certain stuff that we do for the site. When the user signs in, we have to make other service calls to get all the stats. And all those stuff is kind of difficult for us to integrate with the orchard itself, which is why we decided to go down this path. And because we have different clients needing to get the same content, we decided the REST API is the right way to go for us. High level, basically, when a request comes in, if it doesn't map to any of our routes, we make a call to CMS to see if there was a content there. If there was a content there which matches a dynamic page, we'll just render it. That's basically it.
Does your API module has anything in common with the REST API module developed by Sebastian?
I think we'll work pretty closely with him so far. I think it's, I don't know how much changes the one Orchard would create would be. I'm hoping there's not going to be much. Sebastian?
I just made a branch. I just made a branch 6 months ago, which is public, which is the thing, the stuff everyone has seen on the meeting and that you're talking about. He knew about it, so he looked the code, and I see some of the same terms. So I assume it's close to that. They have taken my stuff and make it better. Yeah, but it was private. Can you? Well, I mean, they use it as they wanted. I don't care.
More questions?
Oh.
What is your team planning on potentially contributing back, or is most of the work that you're doing automatically sort of being made available as part of the open source project?
Like I said, the REST API, we are really going through legal review. So hopefully within the next few months, we'll push it back up. We'll always try to be good citizens. As long as it makes sense, we'll push it out. Like the TinyMCE editor, I think makes sense. There are certain stuff that we do might not make sense, so we decide not to do it. As long as I think it's generic enough, that has enough value for the community, we'll definitely try to push it back.
Terrific. Anyone else?
The TinyMCE editor, did you update the module, the Orchard TinyMCE, or did you create a new module?
I believe we created our own, just because there were so much changes, and I don't know if anybody even wants to use our TinyMCE editor. But now that we do this V2, where we actually expose all the different configuration options, I think it's a lot more powerful. I think the beauty of Orchard is this. There's a ton of modules out there. If one doesn't fit, you'll probably be able to find another one. I don't know if it makes sense for us to contribute to the same module or not. We will have to work with the original owner in that case. I think we'll take it on a case-by-case basis. If it makes sense, we'll do it.
Yeah. Do you guys allow your team time to just directly contribute bug fixes or anything that, you know, maybe it's not specific to your Halo project, Waypoint project, but just time to be able to contribute back to the Orchard project? Because I noticed that a lot of companies, when they have their employees utilizing tools like that, if they allow time for them to, you know, really contribute to the development of the product, it helps a lot. You know, that's a big part of the community, is being able to get companies allowing them to have time to do that. You guys do that?
So I think we actually have a process for us to contribute. If we work on it in our actual work itself, there's a process that we have to go through with legal to be able to push it out to the open source community. For us to actually work like full-time in the open source, there's another process to it, which requires allocated time whereby we say, hey, we're just going to work in the open source project itself. And that is kind of hard to go through because we have our own work with our own team, so that's kind of hard. So the process that we have been doing is we try to work as if it is what we need for our site, for our scenario. And if it makes sense, we'll just go through the process and push it back to the community.
Terrific. Well, thank you very much for joining us today. Really appreciate it.